Hi everyone, Richard Tubb here at home in the studio garage in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. I am thrilled that Smileback have invited me to join you today for another webinar on what I think will be a really lively discussion on the topic of customer feedback for managed service providers. Now, we know that gathering feedback and using customer feedback is a must for any IT business that wants to succeed. But what can you do to actually maximize the feedback that you're getting? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be looking at the right strategy you can implement to get customers to give you the feedback that you want and get customers to continue giving you the feedback throughout the relationship. We're going to make this a very, very interactive webinar. If you've joined us on one of these webinars before, you will know we'd love to have a conversation with you rather than just talking at you. So let us know in the chat box right now where you are joining us from and any questions that you might have for us as we go along. You can also use the Q&A box within Zoom to ask any question that you have for our expert guest today. I promise I will stop frequently for us to answer questions. So talking of experts, I'm joined by two experts in the field of MSP customer service, and they're both going to be sharing some really practical advice with you based on their own experiences and that of the hundreds of MSPs that they work with worldwide. So first of all, we're joined by Rory Gallagher, who is the growth lead at Smileback. How are you doing today, Rory?
I'm good. Hello, everybody.
And whereabouts are you joining us? You're in Berlin as well.
I'm in Berlin, yes.
Yeah. And what's the weather? Because you were just saying there's a big storm coming into Berlin at the moment.
Well, it just started raining like crazy and it looks like it stopped. So typical early Berlin summer.
Cool. And secondly, but definitely not least, we are joined by the customer lead at Smileback. You know him. You love him. Eben Marks, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
And you brought me to task earlier because I've been mispronouncing your first name for so long now, haven't I?
Yeah, so it's Eben, not Eben. I don't think you were doing it on previous webinars, so I don't worry, I haven't been nurturing a grudge for too long about it.
I just wanted to let you know, I love you, mate, and I'm sorry if I've been saying your name wrong all of this time. So let's jump straight in then. And I'll start with you if I can, Eben. Why is it important to gather feedback? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, it's just, set the scene a bit. Of course, Smileback is all about helping you get feedback from your customers. And most of our customers are managed service providers, and those who aren't are some kind of service team inside of another, a larger company. So everyone really who's using Smileback is in some way in the business of providing service to people. So really, reputation is absolutely key there, and how your customers feel about you is, the thing you sort of live and die by as business or as a team. And gathering feedback from customers is useful both in the short term, in the sense of, responding to people who aren't happy as soon as you possibly can if something has gone wrong. And then, of course, it's important when you step back a bit and look at it over a bit of a longer time frame in terms of identifying, where are we doing well, what are the strengths we can double down on, where are we not doing so well, and the things we need to, improve upon. And in Smileback, we always think about these like three key pillars of feedback. So collecting it in the first place, and that's mostly what we're going to talk about today. And then assessing it, kind of reporting on it and analyzing the data you're getting. And then, of course, leveraging it. So turning those happy customers into, referrals, empowering your marketing team and sales team with it. Improving relationships with people who haven't been so happy. But of course, those second two pillars are really relying on the first. So that's why today, and you may have noticed this has been a bit of a theme with us recently in terms of the content we've been putting out, the in-app messages we've had going, really trying to get people really engaged in this idea of how to maximize feedback and all the different things you can do to try and make sure you're getting the most possible.
Yeah. And Rory, let me turn to you then. So we're going to focus on collecting feedback today. You work with MSPs, IT solution providers, technology companies all over the world. When I talk about marketing, I talk about marketing being a process, not an event. It's the same for customer feedback, isn't it? And gathering feedback. Tell us a little bit more from your experience, how you can actually engage with customers for ongoing feedback.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like it's an ongoing process. It's ideally like a system you've built into your operations. It's not something that you do every once in a while. It's not just
Sure.
kind of a lengthy survey that you send out once a year to get feedback. It's something that you want to have built into your day-to-day process so that there's a really easy way for your customers to either validate what you're doing is going really well, or to kind of raise their hand and say, you know, there's issues or I'm frustrated by things. And then the better you build this into your process, the easier it is to actually like leverage the feedback, learn from it, take action on it, and do all those things that really give you kind of the long-term value and keep your customers really happy and keep them on board, versus just having it be that, you know, that yeah, one-time event, that one thing, and then it kind of gets forgotten over time.
Yeah. So in terms of maximizing feedback, and I'll say for everybody watching that I've not had a chance to speak to, I used to run a managed service provider business. So this is why I'm asking these type of questions to Rory and Eben here. Rory, in terms of getting feedback from MSPs, what I found as an MSP was the only time we got feedback typically was when something was negative, when something they wanted to say something. And of course, that's probably not a real reflection of what's actually happening in the business. Is that something that you see with people you speak to?
Yeah, I think if you don't make it easy, then you're only going to hear from the people that are the most motivated, which is sometimes people that are super happy and want to go out of their way and let you know.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, it's probably going to be the ones that were very upset and want to escalate it, or want to make it known. That's why we at Smileback have like a one-click survey. So I know a lot of people are customers on this call, so you know how it works. You have, you know, 3 smiley faces that goes out when you close a ticket, and the fact that it's a click of a button and it's something that your customers have the opportunity to do, say every time a ticket's closed, it makes it really easy for the people that are happy, that wouldn't have gone out of their way to like write a lengthy paragraph about it, to, you know, click the positive face, or give you some indicator that things went well. When it comes to like, yeah, starting to gathering feedback, what we find is first and foremost is introduce an easy system, whether it's Smileback or something that is one click, that is very intuitive, that isn't lengthy questionnaires or things that take a lot of time, but make it really easy for your customer. And then you just kind of introduce them to it. So socialize them to the idea of like, hey, we're trying this out. I think what we have here on screen is an example of an email that we recommend during the trial process of Smileback, like sending out to your customers so that they're aware that you're trying out a survey, that, you know, this is something that's meaningful to you, and then you engage with your team. And I think part of it as well is we're focusing very much on the collection of feedback, but actually responding to feedback as it comes in, and especially in the early days, you know, thanking people that gave you a click to green smiley face, and very quickly engaging with those that had a negative response are really good ways to reinforce that you're using the surveys, it actually does have value, and then that can you know, help your customers get engaged more, as well as engaging your team. So having your technicians one, understand the importance of feedback, and why, you know, it's good for them to have a really high, you know, net CSAT score, or give them a KPI that they individually or as a team can strive for, and then that can kind of like trickle down to the customer base, where, you know, if everybody's worried about customer service, or at least like concern and taking effort with it, and then you have a good method of measuring it, then your customers will engage, and then you have the system that kind of reinforces value throughout.
So you mentioned a couple of acronyms there. We're very in the MSP
Yeah, that's
industry. See,
true.
I'm just in the managed service provider industry, in the IT, the information technology industry as a whole, we love using acronyms. So for the benefit of people who are not familiar, the two that you mentioned there were NPS and CSAT. Just give us a quick 101 on what those are.
Yeah, so I'll start with CSAT. So CSAT stands for customer satisfaction. And this is your typical kind of one-click survey it's a very transactional measure. So in the sense of Smileback, it's the smiley faces you see in an email once like the issue's been resolved or the ticket's been closed. Yeah, I think of it, just think of it as, you know, measuring customer satisfaction on a more transactional basis. NPS is Net Promoter Score. So this is a survey that's not done transactionally. It's actually a better measurement of how customers feel about your overall business relationship. It's something you wouldn't want to do on a ticket basis, but more on like a contact basis, say like surveying a decision maker on a quarterly basis. And yeah, it's meant to give you an indicator of, one, how your customers feel about your overall relationship by asking them if they would promote you. It's a good indicator of like retention, or whether or not, you know, people are going to stick around in the long run, or if they see issues with the relationship. And it can also be an indicator of good people to like ask for referrals, since they have indicated throughout the survey they would promote you. So yeah, CSAT being the transactional day-to-day ratings, and then NPS being the more relationship-driven ones you do periodically.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'll give a shout out if you're joining us for the very first time on one of these webinars. Huge shout out for the Smileback team. There is a whole series of webinars on NPS, on CSAT, and everything that you could possibly want to know about customer services. And I know Catherine is in the chat box, so perhaps we can include some links to some previous webinars. But there's some real gold to be found in previous webinars there. I'd encourage you to check them out. Open question here, and again, this is me. I love asking these questions as a former MSP because I think it's some of the questions that are on our audience's mind. Do you run the risk of annoying customers if you are asking for feedback all the time? What's the way to balance encouraging feedback but without getting on people's nerves?
That's definitely a risk and something people are always concerned about when they start using Smileback. The way we think about it in particular, so like with Net Promoter Score, that's something you're doing on like a quarterly basis. So as long as you're not doing it too much, you're not trying to get an NPS response every week, which would be bad, you probably won't annoy your customers. It is more of a concern on the customer satisfaction side of things, because it's like, people do often put in multiple tickets. Are they going to get annoyed with this? The way we set up Smileback is that the smiley faces are actually just embedded within the resolution email that your customers should already be getting. I mean, I think in most processes, you should be letting your customers know that their issue has kind of been formally resolved and giving them an opportunity to raise their hand if it's not, or to at least like confirm that it was. So once people recognize that you can just embed it in that email that your customer should already be getting, then it's less annoying. Then it's kind of just, it's these emojis that are sitting within an email letting them know the issue is resolved. If they want to engage, it's a click of a button. It's not, 5 different questions. It's not super time consuming. It doesn't ask too much of them. But I think that is a big concern. And part of it is just kind of building in your process. For some people, if they have loads of tickets closed with an individual, they might adapt the process. But in general, just having a survey go out with that resolution email tends to work and tends to not annoy customers.
Eben, in terms of sending communications out to customers, do we need to be rigid? Can it only go out as a customer feedback server? Is there other ways that we can actually encourage feedback from our customers?
Yeah, definitely. And just because we make our particular survey and sell that particular survey doesn't necessarily mean we want to like monopolize how you get feedback. And it's really, you should kind of look at it as quite an overall priority for the company and really a strategy for the company of how are we going to collect feedback, what are we going to do with it when we get it. So what Smileback provides, the CSAT survey, the customer satisfaction survey, and the NPS survey, we obviously see that as a very big, important part of it, especially because, tying into something like service tickets is service tickets just being the thing that, probably most people on this webinar are most concerned with for most of their day. But you should absolutely be welcoming and having a plan of how to deal with, when people phone you up, when people leave you Google reviews, when people just give you feedback during a conversation with your tech. And I'll just talk about what we do, because that's obviously what I know best. Of course, we're running Smileback ourselves, and we have all of our results going into a feedback channel in Slack. But we also take and share feedback that comes from, let's say me and you are on a call about some issue. If you give me some interesting, could be bad, could be good, but just interesting feedback in that call, I'll make sure that gets shared with the team. I would just post it into Slack for everyone to see, or I'll bring it up in our next weekly meeting. I often do that with things people say, especially about the product or ideas or requests they have. So that's why it's really important to, I would say, have just a kind of an overarching feedback strategy that where you are aware of like the different channels it may come through, what are you trying to encourage? What are you trying to do with that information?
Yeah. Now, for everybody watching this live, we wanted to make this as interactive as possible. I'm looking at the attendee list. We've got literally people from all over the world here. So we've got folks from Germany, the UK, South Africa, lots of people across in North America, in Canada, in the US as well. I am intrigued. Let us know in the chat box how you are gathering CSAT customer satisfaction at the moment, scores, and whether you are using systems like NPS, whether you are using Smileback or another tool to gather your customer feedback at the moment. What is on your mind to do with customer feedback? We've got 2 of the world's top experts here. Let's put them on the spot and get them to answer some questions about it there. Let's turn to you, Eben. I'm getting really nervous about saying your name wrong. I should say there. He might look like a nice person, but I know that Eben can get really, really angry really, really quickly if I say his name wrong too many times. So forgive me there. I'm getting a little bit nervous on it. I just asked you about gathering. I'm only teasing you. Asked you about gathering feedback from people there. You talked about, speaking to people over the telephone, as well as the smiley face way of feedback. Anything else that you can mention in that area of gathering feedback from people, ways that we can actually gather that feedback from our customers?
Yeah, so aside from, as I say, obviously, we want you to send out lots of surveys using Smileback. I mean, it's going to depend a bit on exactly how you run your business, but for us, it's certainly an important thing, and something we have is one of the kind of things my team is aiming for and is measured on is more like in-depth customer contact. So, try and get people on calls, provide consultation to them, which is obviously an opportunity for us to explain things and kind of encourage them to do more with our product. But it's also an opportunity for us to really get into how they feel about Smileback and get feedback from them that way. You can also look at, obviously social channels are important and getting more so. Which channel that is might vary a bit. For some people it's more about Facebook, for some it's more about Google reviews, some it might be LinkedIn. But that's probably going to be at least one of those social channels is probably going to be important for you as well. And I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can get into it, and I think it can pay to be creative. You might want to even consider sitting down and writing a letter from time to time. Imagine if your managing director, sends out a few greetings cards or letters that have a little, call for response to them, and just see what comes back. Sometimes it can pay to experiment.
Yeah. Rory, you speak to a lot of decision makers in MSP businesses, technology businesses. Something just said there, triggered a thought in my mind. Who should be doing the gathering of the customer feedback? Should senior people be getting involved, or is this a job for everybody in the business? What would you recommend?
That's a really good question. So I think it's actually a bit of a job for everybody. So you definitely need your technicians to have buy-in into it, I think, to have the impact you want. So if your techs don't care about feedback, don't care about what score they're getting, that can have a negative impact. They're also the ones that are the ones that are actually kind of driving what the score is getting, I think, in the day-to-day work. For the most part, what we see with companies is it tends to be at more of the management level, whether it's like a service director or somebody at that level who's the one that really takes on the project, gets it on board, gets all the different stakeholders just kind of participating and bought in. And then from there, I think it's important that you report on this throughout the organization. So I mean, the executive board level doesn't necessarily need to see every response that came in, but they should definitely care about what maybe particularly like what your net promoter score was for a particular month or a particular quarter. So I would see that it's really everybody's participating. It's the technicians day to day. It's the managers really managing and taking ownership of it. And then the leadership, I think, at least participating enough and having a view on it and still instilling in the culture the importance of having measuring feedback and having a good level of customer satisfaction.
Can I put you on the spot here, Rory? So Eben mentioned about social media and gathering feedback, and we've got some great questions coming in. I will get to some of the questions that are coming in, but specifically social media. We talked earlier, or certainly my experience as an MSP was, people are much more willing to give you feedback of the negative sort when they're really upset than perhaps they will reach out and say, hey, great job. Social media seems to be a key for that. You only have to have a look at somebody's Twitter feed and you can see, when people are usually getting in touch with companies to make a complaint about it. What does the role of social media look like? How can you recommend people could gather good and negative feedback on social media rather than just waiting to just get hammered with something negative?
That's a really good point. And I think probably if people don't have an easy way to let you know when they're very upset, then Twitter is going to be the easiest option. So by having good feedback, isn't it? Yeah, or Reddit or wherever they want to go. So I think if you do give people a good path to voice concerns and you engage with them when they do, you could probably avoid it. I mean, there's still going to be your rogue customers out there that just want to make it be known. I know something we've involved is less on avoiding negative feedback going out into the world, but helping you to turn positive feedback into things you use within your presence on the internet. So what we have with Smallback is, and especially if you're a customer, if you haven't enabled it, I'd highly recommend is like if somebody's leaving a positive comment on either the CSAT or NPS surveys, they can turn that into like a positive Google review, as well as giving you permission to use it as a testimonial that can go automatically on your website, or just something you can use. So yeah, I think the key is having an easy way for people to vent when they're angry and having a good avenue to get problems fixed, because I think that's really what they want to do is vent and get the problem solved. So if you have an easy way to do it, that can avoid it. Otherwise, what we try to help with is just putting as much of the positive stuff out there as possible to counteract the few negatives that get out.
Yeah, I've got to ask as well, and for anybody watching this at home, one of the benefits of moderating these type of conversations is I get to get free consultancy off two of the top guys in the world at customer services. But I've got to ask the question, Rory, social media, is there any ways that you shouldn't reply to people? I'll give you an example. I recently tweeted a company and said, hey, I've got a problem here. Can you help? They responded and said, we can't help over Twitter. Can you call us at this number? And I'm like, you can, sorry, I will get off my soapbox there, Rory, but is there a better way that people can respond, or is there any way that you shouldn't respond on social media?
There's actually a good saying I heard recently that I like to apply, that the customer is always right about how they feel. So I would try to apply that if I was responding. I'm no expert on handling angry customers on social media in particular. I don't deal with that a whole lot in Smileback. But yeah, I do think one of it is to like empathize and try to hear them out and don't shoot them down. Like that's an obvious way, especially the way we say when people get a negative response, the last thing you should do is go and talk to your technicians and get their side of the story and then go in and like attack your customer. You should call the customer first, just hear them out, let them know like, I totally get why you feel this way. I hear everything. And then kind of work your way backwards and see like, is this something we could avoid it? Or is this just, you know, how the situation is? But yeah, that's what I'd recommend is, yeah, respond with a lot of empathy. That's the only way I think to handle an upset customer.
Good advice. Hey, can we jump into a couple of questions from the audience, actually? I know I do this regularly and I sort of bounce around, but there's some really interesting questions that we've come in. And Eben, if I can turn to you. So Hunter asked the question. He said, how do you balance the one-click end of survey tickets and the more useful information gained from a customer, from a more question-orientated satisfaction survey? So where does the balance lie there?
Yeah, so Smileback, you know, we really go with a particular sort of design or philosophy of it, which is keeping things as simple as possible for, you know, for the customer, for the client. One click, one optional comment. And the reason for that is, I mean, it's very simple, right? It's really easy, and the easier it is, the more responses you'll get. So even though it isn't, the questions themselves aren't breaking down into that much detail or that many prompts, just the fact that you get so much more responses, you will get more detail as a function of that. That isn't to say there isn't a time and place for a longer survey, and we do it ourselves, right? We use Smileback for CSAT on our service tickets. We've been using NPS for someone else because we have been doing it since before we built our own. We're about to transition over to our own product on that. But when we do things like finding out information for more about like the product, what are people using, how do they feel about it, what would they like to build, you know, that does need more detail. And therefore, when we're doing that, we will use a longer survey. I mean, we use Typeform, that's a nice one, SurveyMonkey. But it's, what are you trying to do, right? First you need to establish what are we trying to do here? And if we are trying to get a gauge on how our service team are doing, service ticket by service ticket, it has to be really simple and it has to be really easy. But if you're like, well, once a quarter or twice a year, we want to really dig down, and we know this won't generate thousands and thousands of responses, but if we get, you know, 20 or 30 really detailed ones about topic X and the implications of topic X and the possible futures of topic X, then by all means, like, go for a longer, more detailed survey. So it's just about, what are you trying to do? And it's about just getting really clear in your mind, like, what are we trying to achieve here? What are the outcomes we're interested in what the outcomes will be happy with, and then matching the tool to the job that needs doing, and not the other way around.
Rory, I want to rewind a little bit. So earlier on, you gave us some really good practical tips on keeping feedback going, once you've got started with that. Bet asks the question, well, it's more of a statement, really. She says they send out constant contact, an email marketing platform to all of our clients to refresh and renew the hope of them responding. So there's two things I want to talk about there.
Yeah.
The first thing is, what does it look like in between NPS surveys, to keep, rather than just getting in touch with people and saying, hey, we want your feedback, how can you keep the conversation going? And secondly, integration with other tools. Smileback obviously aimed at managed service providers, but what other tools could we integrate with to make that conversation keep flowing?
Actually, Evan, I think that could be a good one for you.
Sure.
So, since we have, customers that have been using, or customers of Smileback for years. Like, how do we keep them refreshed and responding, 4 years down the line?
Yeah. So there we go. This is a really good question and a really good topic. I do want to talk a bit more about how to start things off, which was the kind of previous slide. But we'll circle back around to that. There are various ways, and one of the really important things is to kind of think about the overall customer journey. So for your customers, how when they are, that means what I mean by that is, like, what do we do when they're a new customer? There are many things you have to do as part of onboarding a new customer, but one of those things somewhere in that early period should be introducing them to the fact that you are going to try and gather feedback from them, and why that's useful to them. Here's what it's going to look like. And then kind of thinking about, as it continues, what are some other touch points? So the thing about constant contact, we have like a newsletter ourselves. Is there some kind of scheduled communications that we have or that we want to have, and can we use that as a channel for reminding people about feedback? And then there are the more kind of specific moments for each customer. So that could be something like quarterly business reviews or check-ins, or time when you have like detailed one-to-one contact with your main person at each customer. You can take that as an opportunity to explicitly remind them about giving feedback, but you can also, of course, hopefully you've got useful feedback that you can talk about in those meetings. So you can, the type of thing you gather with Smileback or with other surveys, that can be a really important conversation point in those kind of meetings. And that way you're saying, look, we listen to you, we use this, here's what you told us, here's what we did. That's really important. And then, of course, just the more day-to-day responding to it as it comes in, it's one of the most important things is just showing to people that you really listen to their feedback and you act upon it. Not everyone will get that immediately or even say thanks, but it will over time. It will build up the habit for them, because they'll see that there is a reward for them taking the time to provide it. And also keeping your team engaged, because just like Rory's talking about who should be involved in this, what are the different parts of the team. If people on your end are bought into it, or that will come through to the customers, because they'll remind them about it. So reporting on this with your team, having a good and fair and kind of balanced way of like using the feedback from the customers to talk to your team about it, and also having some fun with it, celebrating the wins, giving the team a boost when they're on a really good streak, things like that as well.
Yeah. Harry asks a follow-up question that I think I'm going to jump straight in with here. He says, how can you keep your techs engaged in discussing feedback with clients? Should this be reminded on each service ticket? And do you have any tips on building a feedback-driven culture that may have gone stale over time?
That's that's a fantastic
really
question.
One. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm just reading it myself. Should this be reminded on each service ticket? I definitely think tech should, especially if you've found it's gone a bit stale, it should be reminding people, say, when they're in that kind of, they're wrapping up, basically, they're having that like last conversation where like, okay, seems like, things are working well now. Unless there's anything else you need, I'll be closing the ticket. And when I do that, you're going to get a really, really quick survey. It's it's super helpful to us if you let us know honestly how it went, and we can use that to help you. And even if they don't remember to do it 100% of the time, if they're doing that nice and often, that can certainly help. And then building a feedback driven culture, that's really great. I'll tell you what we do here. It's the thing I can talk about best. So I'm the customer lead. I'm kind of accountable for, our customer service and the feedback we get from customers. Each week, we have a meeting on a Monday. My team and our boss, Andrew Wallace, who's the managing director, we report on the CSAT score from the last week. If that is anything other than 100, we take a note to talk about it. Not necessarily to say, oh my God, everything is terrible, we didn't get 100, but to dig in and say, why did this happen? What was the feedback we got? What did we do about it? Is there something we could do differently next time? Was it one-off? And as I was kind of talking about earlier, anything that's particularly interesting, anything that's particularly just juicy, actually taking that quote and putting it into the agenda for the meeting, and discussing it, and like, what did these people say? Why do we think they said it? And that could be, it's more about the product and the technology. It could be about what my team is doing. It could be about pricing or some other issue. So it's like making it into a thing that your team reflect on together and work on, and have a nice, healthy way of discussing what it means when things don't go right, is really important. And like I say, celebrate the good things. If you have a perfect week, mention it. If you have a streak of perfect weeks, like, celebrate that hopefully in the office soon, if not right now. Share the good feedback publicly in your Microsoft Teams or your Slack, and call attention to it. Get people kind of pumped up about it. There's all sorts of different ways you can go with that. You can actually do things as a team, buy nice things for people to celebrate it.
I'm a big fan of books, Harry. I don't know if you're a big reader yourself. A couple of books I want to throw out there as well. The first one is Mastering the Rockefeller Habits by Verne Harnish. It's a little bit of an older book now, but if you are looking at the culture of your business and how you can incorporate this culture, that's a book that I read when I was an MSP, and hugely helped me. And a much more modern book I'll throw out there, Help Desk Habits by Mark Copeman, who is a fellow Brit. And brilliant book for just encouraging your techs not to get stale with this stuff and to try and engage with people. So a couple of book recommendations there, Harry. Hope they are useful to you. Harry says, thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. He's got a follow-up question. Rory, I'll turn to you on this. Is there a best-in-class response rate, a percentage that MSPs in general should aim towards? You speak to MSPs all over the world. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think so. Our average is 42%. And the way we calculate that is like 42% of people that open the email and see a face will click it. I do think if you look at our customer base, especially like MSPs on ConnectWise in the United States, the best in class is actually higher. I think, Evan, remind me, it's a bit more than 15% or so.
Yeah, I think the top 10% is somewhere north of 50, like mid 50s, I think.
And I should say, forgive me for interrupting, let us know in the chat what your response rate, if you feel comfortable enough doing that, because I know we talked about this before. And for MSPs, IT companies who perhaps are not using a tool like Smileback, and so they're just attaching something to the end of the ticket, I believe the average rate is a 1% response rate there. So I don't know if that matches up with what you've come across in the industry, but it is really, really low compared to Smileback and other tools of this nature.
Yeah, no, I think not having a one-click survey or one that's well designed does tend to get that. Even like the built-in survey that comes with ConnectWise is often 1 to 3% if you're lucky, which tends to be what we find in the beginning of the discussion. It's the people that are super motivated, which often is the very negative ones. You can kind of miss a lot of it. This is a good slide I think that Evan has up now that is the tips we give people when they're first starting off. That's like very simple design tricks that gets like has a massive impact on the response rate. What we find is it's really about the design of that resolution email. So first and foremost, it's just good email marketing practice is like, do you have a subject line that is relevant to people and engages them to actually open it? It could be as simple as like, hey, we're looking to get your feedback on this issue or whatever the case is. But definitely having a relevant subject line, not just being kind of the run of the mill that looks like every other email they've gotten throughout the the process of the ticket that they might have ignored. And then really the biggest piece we have with our recommendation is always have the survey as high up as possible. In the marketing world, it's considered being above the fold. It's whatever is at the top of the email is going to be the most salient. It's what's going to grab their eye. It's what's going to hook them in when your customer does click it and sees like, oh, it's an email letting me know my problem was solved, and now I'm seeing the survey as part of it. And now it's obvious to me. I just have to click one of the faces to give you feedback. A lot of people have the temptation to do like the email we see on the right, where it says like, hey, setup's been resolved. And then now let's just put all this information and then let's bury the survey at the bottom. And then they wonder why, 10% of people respond. So that's probably our best advice is, yeah, have it front and center, have it as part of that resolution email that's obvious that, this is an email that has some utility and use. And then have the visuals be very present and very obvious to your customer. And then if you do that along with one, especially in the early days, or as well as maybe over time as people maybe got more used to the surveys, have your technicians when they're on the phone or when they're resolving the issue or when they're typing up their last email, say like, hey, by the way, I would love to get some feedback on this experience or whatever the case is. If you reinforce that and respond, and if you thank them when they give you good feedback, if you really engage with them when it's bad, then you can get that response rate that's really good. And I imagine that our customers that are getting the 50, 60 ridiculous response rates have feedback so dialed into their process that their customers know that every time they click that face, like not one, but multiple people are going to see it, and it's going to have an impact on their future service. So they're very motivated to engage for their own benefit.
Yeah.
I spoke to a customer earlier. I don't know if he's on this call. I hope he doesn't mind me nicking an idea from him, but he was saying that they just changing the subject line meant that the response rate counted inside Smileback for CSAT went up by something like 15%.
Wow.
Just from, and I think before they had some videos like, we solved your ticket, to please rate the ticket. So just because the difference between a subject line where it's like, oh, I don't even need to open the email because it says it's solved, therefore done, next thing, to, oh, there is something in this email I should do. There is an action to be done here, right? That made a big difference to them. So yeah, some of this simple stuff, and I've helped people who were about to quit Smileback because no one was ever responding to tickets, and it was literally just because they had the ticket details, like the ticket history placeholder, first or almost first. And if you imagine, if you've got one of those, I'm sure you've all dealt with one of those tickets where the fix is really hard to find and it's gone back and forth and back and forth. The Smileback survey might have been under something like 4,000 words of 2 weeks worth of troubleshooting. So of course no one was ever responding to it. So it's a really, even if you've been using Smileback for ages, maybe especially if you've been using Smileback for ages, this is one of these things that, yeah, you should do when you start, but you should check this every couple of times a year, say, just to make sure, like, is this template right? Can people read it? Can people on a mobile read it? Can people looking at it in the preview pane in Microsoft Outlook read it?
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the responses we've got about response rate here. Nathan says 27.9. Danny, who is a huge Smileback fan, he just said in capital letters, I love Smileback, says 45.7% response rate. So those sort of response rates shock MSPs that I speak to when I say, what's your response rate? And they say about 1%. When they're just using the tool, this is the power of tools like Smileback. So I'll say that openly. Thank you for the feedback. To the point there about tweaking your subject line, so powerful, just from a little word. And I should say, Eben here, that something I was taught years ago: you don't nick people's ideas, you swipe them. You steal with integrity and pride from everywhere. So
I like that.
you gave full credit to your customer there for doing that. So I think that's absolutely cool. Anything else in terms of the subject lines, practical tips about that Rory, Eben, you've come across where you can that makes a massive difference to how people can actually send these surveys out?
I just say that, whatever ticketing system you're using, ConnectWise, Manage, Zendesk, Kaseya, Autotask, they will all have somewhere in the email template or the email notification setup, they'll have a subject line that you can edit for this email. And I just think about, there's not that much space there. So, you need to optimize. In most of these ticketing systems, you can put in various data placeholders to personalize things. So using those well, that can be really good. You might want to consider dropping in a first name, maybe dropping in the ticket title, but be careful because the ticket title might be very long. It depends, like if that's limited in the system you're using, or you might want to put that on the end as a bit of extra information, but like have the most important stuff to the left. So imagine if the subject line, and this is a reminder to me, I need to look at this because I actually can't remember the last time I checked this in Zendesk either. Imagine if it said like, Richard, please rate your ticket number, blah, 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 and then maybe the full title at the end just for a bit of extra confirmation. But like the nice eye-grabbing personalization and the action are the things that come first, and then like the details are the things that come right. As I say, the exact setup is going to vary a little bit if you're using ConnectWise, if you're using Autotask, because that's when you set up. If we're talking about CSAT, this one, it's where the faces are in email, you set that up inside the ticketing system, not in Smileback. But if you're doing MPS for Smileback, we send the email for you. You can do you do the subject line there in Smileback. And again, just thinking about just what's a nice, clear, kind of attention-grabbing thing. And it's also something we're working on the tech side in terms of like looking at personalization and stuff.
Yeah, a couple of little thoughts here. Rory, you touched upon it earlier when you and I were talking about marketing being a process, not an event, in the same way that customer service is process. I see so many parallels here. So you've just shared some brilliant feedback about the title, the subject lines of the email. We actually toyed, and I'm open to either of you whether you think this is a good idea or not, but in our email marketing, we got an increase of a 4% open rate by including emojis at the end of an email. Now, personally, I'm not an emoji guy, but it's not about what I like or don't like. It's about whether the emails get opened or not. Would you suggest using something like emojis in a subject line, or is that a no-no?
I'm not against that at all. I think the idea of using it as a process means you can iterate and improve. And when things do get stale, you can try other things out. So I think that's a good practice. It's like you could change your if your response rate is dropping a bit or it just isn't where you want, you could try out a different subject line. And then if you run it over a month and you see you have a 4% increase, then you did something right. If it drops even more, or your customers respond and say, I hate emojis, then maybe that's enough data. But I do think, like you could treat feedback like, and we do this internally with like our internal processes that Eben's team really focuses on handling feedback, and everything we build out is a constant iterative process of which we improve and grow over time.
And Eben, Nick King was the man that you got the idea about changing the subject line.
Yes.
Nick's in the chat, and he says, thank you for the shout out. Mention the analyst's name in the body of the closing email to personalize the feedback. So Nick, thank you for that. And we've taught Eben about swiping those good ideas from you. So thank you for volunteering it there. So let's have a look at some of the other responses that we've got here. We've got all sorts of comments here. While I'm filtering through those, is there anything that that we've missed out when it comes to eliciting feedback from customers? Any tips that you can give us that we've not already touched upon here?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back actually to the point about just letting everyone know about it. So something we say to like kind of all the new customers is to before you start using, or as you're about to start using Smileback, let your customers know about it. There's a sample here. Don't worry about trying to write down this picture. It's in our help center. There's an article called Getting More Reviews. We can post in the chat where we have a sample email for CSAT and for MPS. But not just new customers. Like if you haven't done this before, you just go and do it. Go and do it now. Put it in your newsletter, put it on your blog. And I'd actually be interested to know, I think we have a polling question, how many people watching have you ever sent out basically a communication? Doesn't necessarily need to be exactly like the one in this picture, but have you sent some kind of communication about feedback that isn't just the survey itself, like an announcement or in a newsletter or anything? So that poll should be on screen right now.
Up on screen now then, yeah. So have you ever sent your clients any communications about your feedback survey apart from the surveys themselves? Simple one, yes, no. We'll hold that open for a few moments and I'll share the results with everyone for the benefit of those of you watching on the recording rather than joining us live as well. But that's an interesting poll there. We've got a couple of bits of feedback as well about this parallel between marketing and customer satisfaction as well. Somebody's asked about specifically around the type of subject lines. I think we've covered that. I do want to throw out a tip though. One of the tools that we use internally, and I don't know if it's going to have value for customer satisfaction surveys, but there's a company called CoSchedule, and we've got a tool called the Headline Analyzer, where you can put in and it gives you a score from 1 to 100 on how powerful that headline is. It's more aimed at marketing, but based on what Rory and I have talked about there might be some value in customer satisfaction as well. So, and that's free to use, so that might be an interesting tool to check out there. Cool, right, should we close the poll down then and see what results we have got there? Just wait for the poll results to come back up. Right, so the question was, have you ever sent your clients any communication about your feedback survey apart from the surveys themselves? 69% of our attendees today said yes, they have, and 31% has said no. Rory, does that match up with what you were expecting from the world at large there? Because you speak to so many MSPs every day. So more than 69% have said yes, they do send communications about their feedback survey apart from the surveys themselves. Any feedback for the 31% who say no, they don't do that? What lesson they can learn there?
Yeah, I'm actually, this is good. I imagine these are people that have been using Smileback for some time. I know that's something I always push for when I'm helping people get started on a trial. It's like, please announce it. And a lot of them they're scared. They want to make sure everything's tried out first. They have to get everybody on board before they make such a big announcement. But I do think once you feel comfortable, I think it's very good to announce to your customers and just bring them back into the loop. Just say, like, as simple as the email that we have as a template that you can use, just to inform them why you're doing this, what's the value, and so it's not super random. When they see it, they're like, oh, I've read about that smiley face. And then yeah, if you use feedback throughout the business, that's even better as well.
Yeah. Is there any cybersecurity implications here as well about announcing this sooner and being transparent about it? The reason I ask is, we are teaching, MSPs are teaching clients to be very suspicious of emails that are sent through to them. So is there any best practice there to say, hey, you should expect these type of emails? And it isn't just, we are encouraging people not to click on random things. So we need to prepare them for this, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. So, letting people know that it's going to be coming, what it is, why it exists, what it'll look like, what it's for, what's on the other side of that thing when you click on it. It should just be a comment page. Obviously shouldn't be something asking for their PIN number or whatever. Is definitely important. And what we go for, and I'm sure this is probably similar for lots of companies who provide customer satisfaction software, is we are just trying to get their rating and their comment, and we will try and handle the rest of the details with the communication we have with your ticketing system that you set up, that we help you do in the most secure way possible. So nothing that actually asks people to start inputting in anything other than their comment in terms of like their name, their email address, anything like that.
Yeah, makes sense. So for everybody watching live, I'm going to give a final call for questions now. If you've got any questions for these two gentlemen, now is the time to get them in the Q&A or the chat box. I will keep an eye open for them, very conscious of time. I've got a question, but before I do, is there anything that I have not asked you about today that you think it's important that we share with the audience?
No, I mean, nothing from you. I'm very happy to just keep going on. I think there's a few things we haven't yet got to in chat, so.
Yeah, no worries. Let's jump in then. So we've got a question here from Terry. He said, have you found that some clients experience survey fatigue, especially noisy clients with low response rates? Great question, Terry. Who would like to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that.
Okay.
There's a sort of a life cycle to this, in that when you first start using it, especially if you do a really good launch with, what we were talking about with the announcement, and like getting your design all right, where you see like a nice big like burst of feedback at first, it is natural for that to like level off a bit and kind of come down a bit. And he was asking about the response rate, like however you measure it, it will measure something that is useful to you, and tell you something. So that's natural, and that's why this kind of ongoing reminders, at the level of the ticket, at the level of the like client meetings, the business review meetings, demonstrating the value of the feedback to the customer is really important, because it can help push it back up a bit, and it will come down a little bit, and then you give it another push. So it is an ongoing thing, and you will probably see some divergence, and there are certain, not just individuals, but there are certain companies who tend to respond more and ones that tend to respond less, and sometimes that's something it's always something it's worth trying to do something about, because sometimes there's just a bit of a blocker, maybe often around the level of your main account contacts, if that's someone more senior, of like how they feel about giving feedback and how they respond to it, that you can overcome, and then you can like unlock more feedback from that customer. Sometimes you might find a client company where there's just something about the culture of that company means they just tend to respond less than others. But I would say there's always value in giving it a go, and trying to refresh things with people.
Good response there. We've had a couple of questions about this and some feedback about it as well. But Nathan was the first to ask the question: what are the best practices for rewarding customers for their feedback? Now, when we talk about rewarding, we talk about not just a pat on the back, but could there actually be some sort of reward mechanism in there as well? Rory, I'll turn to you in the first instance. Any thoughts on this? How will you best practices for rewarding customers?
Yeah, I think Bet Clark is in the chat had said that one simple thing they do, they thank every customer for positive feedback. So that's an easy one. That's a simple one. I know what we do often at Smallback is we'll for any feedback that comes in, we'll particularly try to like send people something. So either it's like a card signed by the team, or like a pair of Smallback socks. Is obviously, if you haven't gotten any recently, it's been very difficult given the pandemic situation. But in general, trying to find something nice to give our customers as a thank you for leaving a review or giving feedback. Eben, do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, this is something that people bring up with me quite often. I would say definitely be careful about pre-promising any kind of reward. Like everyone, like we will do that. We will give you a Starbucks gift card, or we'll give $5 to charity. Just because if you do that too much, you obviously you're kind of getting into the territory of like skewing your results potentially. What I think can be nice though is this sort of like the kind of random acts of kindness model, where like every now and again you will pick out some people, maybe just from the hat, or maybe because they've like said something particularly insightful, even if it was actually more on the negative side, and you'll send them something afterwards. So you know, like checking once a week or once a month, and like, yeah, these people will send them a bit of like merchandising or send them some donuts to the office. So that way you're not like, you're not kind of skewing things in advance, but you're giving people a bit of reinforcement afterwards. That can be a nice thing to do. And that's definitely something that some customers have spoken to me about them doing. So yeah, so I would say like definitely think about it. Just be careful. Don't get tempted to just start like trying to juice it too much by promising everyone some kind of material thing.
I would absolutely back that up from my experience as a former MSP owner myself. You know, and thank you, Bet, where you said, you know, thank people for any positive feedback. That's the number one thing. I think actually letting people know that they've been heard. The other thing I would say, and we've got a couple of comments about this, is so Sean, for instance, said we enter our clients in a draw to win local baseball tickets. Brilliant. I love that. But you are not, what's the right word here? You are not bribing people with a specific feedback. What I have found is and this goes for referrals in business as well, if you say to people, send us a referral and we will pay you X amounts, some people, believe it or not, and this is human nature, are actually put off by that because they won't do something if they feel as though it's perceived to be only done for the reward. So be very aware of that when you're offering gifts or something in exchange for people giving feedback. However, if you randomly appreciate them, if you randomly send a gift out, or as Sean has done, enter clients into a ticket, into a draw to win local baseball tickets, that really can work. So just my 2 pence of a former MSP owner here as well.
Yeah, and I think there's, the thing to remember is like when you're asking for the feedback, you're trying to find something out, right? You're trying to you're trying to find out information, and you don't want to skew that too much. With something like a referral program, you can maybe we are ourselves, you can be a bit more like pushy with it, because you are at that point you're targeting people who you already know are happy. So you're not kind of doing you're not skewing the experiment. You already know these people are happy. Now you're doing something, but yeah, treat the point of the gathering feedback, the point where you're doing that, you don't want to interfere too much with what the results might be.
Yeah. I've got a question. I'm very, very conscious of time. We've got a question around projects here, because we've mostly talked about ongoing and with tickets. Is there a good time to ask for feedback after a project has been completed?
I can really only say what I know from our customers, which is that the question I usually get asked around projects is there a way we can survey people at the end of a phase of a project or the closeout of a project? Because obviously you might not want to survey, if the project is to install 500 computers in a school, you don't necessarily want to ask people about how like every single computer got installed, but you might want to do like, how did the pricing and estimation go? How did the fit out go? How did the aftercare go? Or you might just want to do, how did the whole project go? I'll just say, in terms of Smileback specifically, we have a way in which it can be used for projects, which is a little bit of a workaround, but we are also considering the possibility of, could we build something a bit more specific to that? And with MPS, we already have the possibility that you can send one-time MPS surveys as well as the recurring ones. So they could be a good fit for projects as well. Make an audience of people who are your project contacts, send them a one-time MPS survey, and with some of the customization features available in that compared to CSAT, you can also like play around a little bit with the question. So you could say, how did we do? And then on this specific project, not just like in general. So that's an option you have in Smileback as well.
Cool, thank you. We have covered an incredible amount of topics and distances. You would have thought when we're talking about one small topic here, you wouldn't have realized how much there is to actually go into. Just as we come up to the end of the hour, I'm very respectful of everybody's time. Is there anything that you would like to cover that we've not already touched upon for either of you?
I wanted to talk a little bit about the response rate in a bit more detail, because I saw someone ask about it earlier.
Well, if we got the time, so there's a question here. So Harry asked a question and he said, how does the response rate get calculated within Smileback? So that's more technical. Is it, well, I will hand to you. How does the response rate get calculated here?
Yeah, thanks for finding out, Richard, because I saw it kind of go past earlier. Yeah, so there are 2 surveys available from Smilebock: customer satisfaction. That is the one with the 3 faces. That is embedded into the ticket itself, so into the ticket notification template from ConnectWise or Autotask, whatever you're using. So really important things to remember about that is your ticketing system is sending the email, Smilebock is not. So what we have to do there is we count who viewed it. So when they open the email, those faces get loaded and we know when that happens. And then we obviously know if people responded. And so you'll see, if you're looking at your CSAT reviews page, it will say underneath the response rate, it'll say survey seen and the responses. So there are limitations, unfortunately, because it makes it a bit harder to gauge the impact of like the sender address or the subject line on the actual open rate of the email. But it is useful because, as I've said before, if you stick that survey down underneath 100 lines of text, the response rate will go down. If you put it at the top, the response rate will go up. Or like Nick was saying, if you personalize it a bit more, you might see it go up. I mean, I can't guarantee that you will, but it seems like a good bet you will. So it's measuring something that is useful and that can give you information to respond to. Now with Net Promoter Score, our other survey, Smilebock is emailing that ourselves because it's not tied to a ticket. It's sent on a recurring or a one-off basis, but like a schedule that you have chosen rather than being triggered by the ticket. In that case, we are able to track how many surveys did we send and how many responses we got. And we decided in that case, given that we had that ability, given that we know people are interested in measuring it that way, then that's what we provide. And again, we make it clear. You'll see on the NPS responses page underneath response rate, it will say survey sent, responses received. So in each case, we're trying to make it nice and clear on the results page how do we measure that. So there's no, so you can see what we're doing. It's like nice and transparent. So both of them, it's kind of the best one we can do in each situation, and both of them tell you something useful.
Super. Eben, I just want to touch very, very briefly, if we can, on integrations. So we've got ConnectWise MSPs here. We've got Autotask. We've had, obviously, Bet talks about using Constant Contact. Nathan has asked a question. He said, comments from customers, can we put them into Slack? How does that work? So could you very, very briefly talk about integrations? Because we've got all manner of MSPs joining us from all over the world with different tools here today.
Yeah, let's go on over to our demo Smilebock account and look at the integrations page. So yeah, as well as, of course, using Smilebock with your ticketing system itself, we then have lots of other kind of third-party integrations. So as you'll see here, a lot of them are around like business intelligence or dashboarding or reporting. You know, BrightGauge is by far the most popular at the moment, but more and more people using Power BI now. Down here though, so yeah, we launched a couple of months ago now integrations for Slack and for Microsoft Teams. And what that lets you do is, it's pretty simple at the moment, actually. It basically just, you set it up, you choose your team or your Slack channel and your Teams channel that you want to share this in, and it will post each CSAT or each NPS or both, depending on what you decide, into there automatically. So what was the rating, who were they, what did they say? It's very, very simple. We are looking at adding some options to give you a bit more control over, like, maybe you want to only share positive ones in one place and, you know, the negative ones in another. We're kind of investigating that as just the technical possibilities at the moment. So we use the Slack one, and what I was saying earlier is we automatically get the feedback from our surveys posted into it. It's literally called feedback, the channel in Slack. But I will also, or other people will also drop in things there. So, you know, if someone just writes me an email and they say some interesting feedback, I mean, I don't mean anything more complicated than just copying it and dropping it in there. The same, or typing up a summary of what someone said on a phone call, just because then the whole team can see it. You know, people can scroll through it. You know, the people who do marketing might be like, oh, maybe this person could be a case study or a featured on a website. Maybe the technical team go, oh, it seems like there's something we need to dig into here around like performance or like possible future features. That's so yeah, do check those out. Of course, our help center has, you know, installation guides for these things.
Yeah, and we use hashtag a wins channel within Slack, within my own team and within the Tech Tribe. We use Microsoft Teams and we have a wins channel there. It's so important, isn't it? Because you get this feedback, especially if it's great feedback. You want to share it with everyone rather than, you know, just sort of leave it hidden away in a system somewhere. So thank you for explaining that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think we need to wrap it up there. We could talk about this for a long time. For those of you joining us for the very first webinar, again, I want to give a shout out. We've gone over in previous webinars, we've gone deep into NPS, we've talked about integrations, we've talked about all manner of topics. So again, go to the Smileback content hub there. You will find details of previous webinars. I'd highly encourage you to check them out. Thank you both for your time today. Always a pleasure to speak with you. If anybody wants to continue the conversation with you directly, how can they find you?
Yeah, so we have we have a link where you can book calls with the customer team directly. That Katrin just posted on the chat. It's that calendly.com link, which is in the chat right now. You can reach us on help@smileback.com. That's just like our main help desk email address. So me, my colleague Yuria, my colleague Natan, we monitor that and respond to things there. And yeah, and if you come by to the website, we have that content hub that you've been mentioning, where we have guides that go more like in-depth articles. So yeah, please do get in touch. I just actually to really emphasize, all support and consultation is included in your subscription. So, you won't be billed extra for like having a call or for getting some help with the setup. We don't do that. You just pay the same fee each month, and it's included in that.
Super. Rory, thank you for your time today. Always a pleasure to see you. And I think we got away without the storm hitting in Berlin as well, didn't we?
So yeah, it's now sunny again for the next 20 minutes until the next storm.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. I know we've gone a little bit over time, but thank you, those of you who have stayed with us and all the questions that we've got through. A lot of love out there for Smileback, and I think a lot of people who are not using Smileback very interested in taking a look at the product now. Thank you. That concludes today's webinar. Our next webinar is going to be on the 29th of June. If you're watching this on the recording, get in and register now. If you're watching this live, get in and register now. We will look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Ibn, thank you. Rory, thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.